Hey there everyone, this is Oniika, and this month's art tutorial video is going to be on cleaning pixel art. Now, if you remember my first video, I showed how to get from an illustration to double the final size of the sprite here, and then colorize that and scale it down to what will be a basis for your final sprite, which looks pretty clean, and I said takes out a lot of the guesswork and a lot of the pixel work, but of course doesn't give you a perfect result. That's where the manual cleaning comes in. I've mentioned before that this is the part of the process that doesn't necessarily take the longest, but you have to put the most thought into what you're going to do and how you're going to clean it. Because obviously, scaling this down to this, it only takes, a few clicks. You don't have to really think about that too much. It does give you pretty clean results, but obviously it doesn't quite give you something that can be a finished sprite. This is the step that really finishes it off, really makes it look nice, but again, kind of requires the most decision-making, let's say. Let's call it decision-making. Now I have here this month's Patreon pixel art. I decided I'd use this, that way you can see, in addition to the process images I'll be posting, you can see how I go into doing this. Of course, you've seen me do this a lot of times on stream, but I've never really talked about what goes into it because to me, a lot of it is just second nature of how I clean up the sprites, but that's not how it started. I made a lot of mistakes early on. So we have a color reference over here, and the reason I have this is you've seen before, what I essentially do is I use these kind of bluish shadows and I just fill bucket to get our base colors. And that works for the most part. Most of this looks pretty good, but skin, if you know anything about humans, they have something called like blood and tissue in their skin, which means a completely blue kind of shadow doesn't really look natural, makes them look kind of weird. So I'll be using a screenshot here to get a darker shade, and it should just make her look a little more alive. So oh look, first mistake. I had that on anti-alias still. So we're going to take that off, and to get this mid-tone, I'm going to do something really simple. I'm just going to copy... No? Where is it? Here it is. Copy the old mid-tone, fill it with the lighter color, make a new layer without deselecting. Oops, I accidentally hit crop. Fill it with the darker color, and then bring down the opacity to about... that's about 45. That looks good. So we'll start like that, and then I'm going to get our skin outline color, which I'll just kind of eyeball it. Yeah, we'll go about there. Now, the first place I'm going to start here is going to be here along the back, because there's something interesting that happens here. You see, we kind of have this little step that occurs with the pixels. And I said before that this phase is kind of like, playing connect the dots. So you get your outline color and you get your mid-tone. And, most of these in-between shadows look pretty nice. Might just add, a pixel here or there to smooth it out a little bit. And you get to the very outline of it. But then you start to get these little steps. Now, generally, when you're cleaning things up, you want to have... Where's a good example? What can we play with? Okay. we'll play with the edge of the blade here. You want to sort of have everything be the same amount of pixels. So this is a 3-pixel line. Next one's going to be a 3-pixel line. Next one's going to be a 3-pixel line, etc. And that's going to keep things looking pretty smooth. Now, there's a few places here where, okay, due to the curve of the blade, you know, you can't quite get this 3 pixels. Or no, I guess you can in this. Here's where it is. Can't quite get this 3 pixels, so you're going to have to decide, well, okay, I need it 4 pixels. But you want to keep then a lot of these either 3 or 4, and you do that by sort of alternating. You can see this is a 3-pixel line, this is a 4-pixel line, and then we're back to 3. That one's going to be 4, etc. That's not the best place to show it off. Let's see. Probably the hair. There we go. So basically, one of the rules is as the curve gets a little wider, starts to turn more into a straight line. The way to do that is you go, well, okay, 1 pixel here, 2 pixels, 2 pixels, 2 pixels, 2 pixels, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then that doesn't matter because that's a straight line. Yeah, that gives you the nice curved look. A lot of times, you know, if you just draw with pixels, you know, that came out pretty good. That actually came out a lot more even than I can normally draw those. But you start to get weird, you know, you're just trying to draw a curve and you're getting weird stuff happening where, see, there's a lot of like short pixels here, but a lot of longer ones there. And that's where this, you know, sort of rule of thumb comes into play, that you want to keep all the 2-pixel lines kind of bunched together, but as it gets, as it straightens out, I'm sure there's a term for that. For angles, it's acute, but I don't think curves have acute and obtuse curves. I don't think that's a term. You know, a smart person would have actually researched to see if there was a term first, but I'm not known for my anything, really. But here we get this interesting little thing, you know, that was happening on the blade. You can't just keep doing 2-pixel lines, because if you do, oh no, it completely changes. And if I start doing 1-pixel lines, you see it gets a little too sharp. So this is where we do the little alternating thing. So we go, okay, there's a 2-pixel, here's a 1-pixel, 2-pixel, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And that's going to be the green color there. And when you zoom out, maybe not that far because you can't quite see it. When you zoom out, it makes this kind of smooth curve, despite the fact it's being drawn in completely aliased pixels. So that's something that's a little difficult to wrap your head around at first, like when you are very, very first beginning, because, you know, you start to get a feel for, okay, well, I want it to, you know, go 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, etc. But you can't really do that everywhere, so you have to keep in mind that if the curve has to be a little more subtle like that, or has to be a certain diagonal, you just alternate between, okay, 2-pixel, 1-pixel, or as we're seeing up here, there's a little bit of 3-pixel, 4-pixel. And that's just kind of a, you know, it's a good little rule, I guess, to keep in mind. I guess we'll kind of start with the face here, because it might be more interesting. I think I made... Yes, I was dumb. I made that dark skin tone, and I never actually used it for anything. But that's fine. We'll just make a new one. And we'll go here, because there's a few places here that are sort of along the side. And again, you just kind of take the lines you had before and just colorize them. Now, a good way to keep track of this, a good way to sort of mark your progress, especially since, you know, we have dark colors here where a black line might look nice. So I might go, okay, you know, let me get my darker version of this color, let me get my outline version, and you start drawing it in, and you go, I might not be able to tell. You know, you could probably see it in the video, but that's pretty similar to that color. And if, you know, I'm zooming out and kind of giving it a quick glance to make sure everything looks right, I can't really tell the difference between those two colors. So what I tend to do is I take my fill bucket, get a nice weird color like this, and even though it's kind of eye-searing, there's no way you're going to question now what is your old outline and what becomes your new outline. And then the only place I tend to use a complete black is for the eyelashes here, which I tend to do, as you see, I tend to think of it as, whereas most things, my English there kind of failed on me, as most things are kind of a 1 pixel line, the eyelashes, the top eyelash, I like to think of as more of a 2 pixel line. It just kind of makes the eyes stand out a little more. Makes it look a little nicer, a little more like an illustration and less like a big collection of pixels. And then a thing I do is for the lower part of the eyelashes, I take the darkest skin value, and then I take the mid-tone and the shadow and kind of use those as it goes down to kind of keep the completely stark white pixels from blending into the skin tone, and just in general it just looks nicer. Of course, depending on what style you want to go for or what look you yourself may have come up with, and of course the resolution, maybe you might not want to do that, but that's what I do. Another nice little technique here is I'll tend to put some of the darker skin values around the eyelash, which is again to keep it from being such being in such stark contrast to the skin tone and creating sort of an anti-aliasing effect. If you want to go really crazy, you could do stuff like this throughout the sprite where 2 colors kind of touch, but I feel like in a lot of places it just sort of bogs it down and makes it look a little strange. So I don't recommend doing that too much, but for the eyelashes it tends to look nice. So we're going to get this second value here. I tend to only use 3 colors for the eyes rather than 4 because they're pretty small areas. You don't really need the level of manual anti-aliasing for the eyes that you would need for larger color values because they just don't take up that much space. And we're just going to put some darker pixels near the eyelash to kind of, again, blend it in a little better. And then for the mouth, we're going to take the shadow tone and have that in the center, and then take 2 midtones there. And you can see I'm not doing on the inside of the sprite, there's not a whole lot of work that needs to be done. Almost everything is, again, it's part of the outline. So here we get this nice little step from 1 to 2 pixels. And you might, if you really want to, you can make these all completely uniform. You can do some stuff here and there, but you don't need to really do much more than just clean it up and make it look a little more even. Again, this technique overall that I use does take away a lot of the guesswork and just leaves you with things like this where you see, okay, scaling it down didn't leave many of the mid-tones here, so I'm just going to manually add them. And, yes, we need the eyebrows. For the eyebrows, I just use the, how will that look? Will that look good? Yeah. I just use the outline color for the hair and just make it, again, like a 1 pixel line. Scaling that down, it sometimes gets lost. So you have to, just keep in mind those rules again. Step from 1 pixel to 2 to however many it needs to be straightened out. And I'm just going to touch up the anti-aliasing under this. And comparing, mostly the face, but the back here, to the uncleaned version, you can see, particularly with the eyes where we redrew a little bit of it, where it starts to look just higher quality and a little nicer. Another thing I like to do with the eyes, of course, is get a little eye shine, which I kind of do by I go to the shadowed part of the whites of the eye, and I do 1 pixel and then another pixel in. So you get just enough to tell that there's an eye shine without it, without having to think about it too much, without having to do too much with it. Now the blade is going to be kind of different. Here you see we have our sort of 4 steps that we have with everything else, but I don't really like that too much. I don't think it really looks much like a blade. Blades tend to be very reflective. They catch light very easily because, they're shiny and metal. And you could do this with other shiny metal things, but blades in particular need to have that sort of sharp, reflective look. So I have over here, in addition to this being some colors I'm going to use. So let's get those in first. Yes, I'm on the same layer. I guess I did get... Come on now. Did I already change the color? I can't tell. I'm very colorblind. I don't think I did. Ah, okay, I see what I did. I see what's going on. Alright, so we're going to get this color. We're going to get our outline color. We'll just start it right in here. And, because I filled it in. Go back over here. Yeah. Okay, there it is. And that kind of changed the colors over there, but that's fine. I'll manually fix that. So, what I kind of do with the blade to give it more of that that sort of gleam is, you can see I have my lightest tone is almost completely white, and as usual I'm just going to, play connect the dots here. This starts to get into instead of 3 and 4 pixels, you can see starts to be 2 and 3 pixels as the blade curves outward. This is a very long blade, and working on it so zoomed in, oh my goodness, but hey. Big, long katana blades are pretty sick, yo. I don't like what I did there. I'll make that 3 and that 2. Yeah, somewhere. So sometimes you run into things like this where I don't really like some of the decisions I made, because you can see this doesn't exactly line up. So I'm going to go around the middle of this particular curve and add a few more pixels. And yeah, zoomed out, you can see, okay, it looks nice and straight. Not as much of a disaster as it may have seemed like for a moment there. I also use this neon green background essentially so I don't have to erase anything, so I can just do what I did there, where I picked the green color and just sort of drew over pixels that I didn't want anymore. Whoops. So yeah, we're going to keep this 1, 2, 1, 2. Keep that till about here, where it goes into all single pixel. And 2, 3, 4, 5. And then what I do is I kind of guess, but I go, okay, well, about here, let's say, and about here, I draw in these little lines. I'm going to take the the shadow color. So these things don't really have names. So I have to remember the internalized names. I kind of call them. I usually call this either the darkest, not the darkest, the shadow value, or the color 3. I try to keep my terms relatively consistent as to not confuse people as to what the heck I'm doing, but, you know, art's weird. People want to try to give art a lot of terms, but it kind of doesn't, because every artist does everything a little differently, so you can't really have unified terms for things, especially not techniques that are, you know, relatively very new to art, such as pixel art. So I'll stumble sometimes and be like, what did I call that? But yes, you can see what I did here is I used the mid-tone to sort of make it look like the blade has this really big, cool gleam on it, and you can see it makes it look a lot cooler, a lot sharper, a lot more stylish than just having the typical 4 value sort of cell shaded look that everything else has. So we're going to just come in here and we're going to continue. Again, being aware of how many pixels we're drawing prior. So we go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That one's going to be 4. That'll be 3. That's 3. That's 3. That's 4. 3, 3, 4, 3, 3. And I kind of just do this in my head. That way I don't, you know, get anything really weird, like draw, you know, only 1 here, and then 4 there, and then 2 there, and then another 4 there. Because you can see that gives it a very, like, wiggly look that even zoomed out you can start to see just looks bad. And that's another reason why this is sort of a personal hot take, but also sort of a process thing. I don't necessarily need to post my animations or pixel art at double the resolution because I work at such high resolution, but also because scaling the sprite up, you know how a lot of people will do pixel art and you'll see it, they'll post the native resolution and then they'll post like a 2 or 4 or 8 times depending on the size, or maybe all of the above. They'll post scaled up versions of the sprite, sort of detail shots. The problem is, though, when you're working this close in and you do weird little things like, you go, okay, well, I want to make a line that sort of curves out. So you go, okay, here's a really long line, and it goes like this, and then it goes like this, and then that, 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 and then, you might think, okay, that looks like, decent, because all you're seeing is the little dots. But then you zoom out and you're like, woo, it looks very wiggly. It looks very, very kind of slapdash together. So I think it's very important, you've seen me do it a lot on streams and you're seeing me do it here, is you have to zoom out and kind of get a look at some of what's going on to make sure that you're making good decisions with how many pixels you're drawing and how far apart they are, right? Like making sure you're only having like 2, 3, 2, 3, etc. I guess if to equate it to anything, I guess I could equate it to music. Now, granted, I'm not a music expert, but I'm starting to second guess this analogy because maybe I'm about to say something that's kind of entirely wrong. But you know how music theory, there's certain note progressions where it's like, okay, well, why does music sound good? How do you make a song sound good? And the reason why a lot of music has similar progressions is because if you play a certain note, the next note you play can only be so many notes away from that. You can't really play a really high note and then a really low note and then something kind of in the middle and then something ridiculously high and then something ridiculously low. Like, it'll just sound like you just slammed your fist randomly on a keyboard. There is, that's kind of where music theory comes in. It's like, okay, well, how do you, what notes are acceptable to play after another note? And that's kind of how I look at cleaning up pixel art. There's only so many what am I trying to say? You can only do things like, 2 and 3 pixels. You can't really do like, okay, here's 1 pixel, here's 2 pixels, here's like 11 million pixels, here's like 2 stepping up like that, here's 3, here's a bunch, here's 3, here's 1. It starts to look very weird. Unless you're trying to do something that is like very unnatural, like level terrain or something, which would look kind of scribbly and kind of strange anyway. You have to be aware of how many pixels you're drawing next to each other. And again, maybe someone's made up a term for that, but I certainly don't know it. So we'll just call it counting your pixels. Let's call it that. I'm seeing something here I don't like. It is this 3 pixel here I don't really like. So what I'm going to do is look, there we go. We'll find this one here that's 2 pixels. So what I don't like is I want to make this a... Oops. I want to make this one here. Where was it? I can't find it now. Oh no. That was anti-aliased. Let's look at that again. It was a 3-pixel line about... Well, maybe it didn't look as bad as I thought. But it was about there, and I was looking at a 2-pixel line, I think about here. So I'm going to go in and go, okay, I want this to be only 2 pixels. So I might go in and start being like, okay, well, get that 2 pixels, and then, oh no, I have to fix this one, etc., etc. Instead, you saw I made a little sneaky selection there. What I'm going to do is just take that selection, copy it to the layer above, and just nudge it over. Just nudge it over 1 pixel. Except I did something dumb, and I got rid of the background. I wanted to keep that background. Keep that background. Just nudge it over 1 pixel, and I think I like that a little more. Or do I? Yes. That looks nice. You can barely tell the difference. Or, I don't know, maybe it makes the blade look a little too thin. That's something where, like I said, there is a little bit of thought involved in this. There is a little bit of trial and error. See, here we got something weird. We have some of the outline here inside where there shouldn't be an outline. On the hip bone. And that part of the body is called the hip bone. That thing that kind of juts out along the hips. Don't call it anything else. There's a certain term some of you out there like to call it. That's not what it's called. That's called a hip bone. But yeah, you can see that's pretty much the long and short of the process. It's just connecting the dots, making sure you're keeping note like, okay, that's 4 pixels, that's 3, that's 3, that's 3. Maybe that'll be 2, but it might be 3. We'll keep it 3. 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. And that brings us to what would be our next color. And it just, just kind of going over it and keeping those things in mind. As soon as you get to like an intersecting line of another color, I've mentioned this before, you want to keep in mind what is essentially on top. So you go, okay, this part of the stocking is, of course, over the leg. So this line here will then become the stocking color. And yeah, that's more or less it. I don't want to make this a, this is already kind of a video of inflated length. So I'm not going to go over the whole sprite. But of course you will be seeing that relatively soon. I'll probably just post the video and the finished sprite at the same time. But there you have it. You can see mostly the blade and the face are what we worked on, and if you compare them to... It's a little hard to compare with the purple outlines. So let me just real quick. There we go. But you can see, the skin tone being different. Looking more like an actual flesh tone, as well as the sword and the face getting cleaned up a little bit. Just starts to make it look better, a little more, I don't want to say professional, because that's kind of a nonsense word, but just makes it look cleaner, a little more like something you would see in an actual game, rather than just a little MS Paint scribble. And yeah, that's about it. I don't really know what else I can add. I kind of, part of me wants to just now finish this entire sprite because I generally do the cleanup all in one go. Uh, but again, I don't want to make this, this is already, what, a half an hour long because I had to narrate this and think of how to say it. So I don't really want this to go on any longer than it has to. But yeah, that's more or less all there is to it. You just connect the dots and keep in mind how many pixels apart things are. The only other thing I would mention is you're seeing that I'm kind of jumping around a bit. And now that's something I do anyway with my art. I tend to jump around the entire piece just with absolute reckless abandon, with no respect for process. And sometimes that gets me into trouble. But I feel like for cleaning pixel art, especially if you colorize the line like I did, make it this hideously obvious purple that will always stand out, I feel like that's actually beneficial because you're kind of, scanning the entire drawing, the entire frame and looking for, okay, what looks weird? And you go well, what looks weird? Okay, well, this hair here coming down, there's that little stray pixel, and there's that line that gets a little too thick. And you start to fix things like that, and you're like, okay, well, what else looks weird? Well, I don't necessarily have a color value for this yet, but I didn't like how that line was very uneven, so I'm just gonna do a little quick fix there to even that up a little bit. And I feel like that's actually beneficial because you're noticing these things that are incorrect, these things that sort of stand out, that will need to be cleaned, and you're fixing them as you see them, meaning that anything else, anything that stands out is going to obviously be standing out because it's bad. So if you fix that as you see it, you're pretty much going to catch all the little mistakes here and there, and it'll end up looking not bad. Strangely enough, I know. But again, you can see like the big reason why I use these techniques, the big reason why this manual cleanup isn't so bad, is I'm not doing a lot of work on the inside lines at all. Again, scaling it down has kind of done that work for us. There is still, like here, a little cleanup I want to do just to make it look a little more natural, but I don't have to do that. I'm not going to have to go in here and really touch anything aside from those purple pixels. Same for here. Same for these cool little blades. There's not a whole lot that needs to be done on the inside. You're just kind of playing the world's most intense version of connect the dots. I don't know, I shouldn't say that. I've seen a lot of intense connect the dots in my time. But you're playing a version of connect the dots. We'll just say. There are some little tight-in areas like hands, which, you get sort of a cluster mess of pixels here, but even then, this would be very scary to have to draw this whole area manually, but because we did scale it down like we did, you can see I pretty much got it done before I even got to finish that sentence. So, yep, that's pretty much it. That's our little quick look at some of the logic that goes into cleaning up pixel art. I really like doing these sort of long lines here. They're always my favorites in drawings and pixel art. I don't know what it is. I like long, smooth lines. It's very aesthetically appealing to me. And especially with pixel art, you know, being able to do a long, smooth line effectively and making it, you know, only barely look like pixels is very rewarding. Because, you know, you tend to think of pixel art as being very blocky. You tend to think of, like, you know, the what would you even call it? The kind of new retro quote-unquote style where everyone's very very rectangular. Whoops. And, you know, I don't really like to do that. So these little tricks here and there with outlining things, like again this blade, I think ended up looking really cool. And you can see it's not too different from this, aside from just the coloration and the big old gleam on it. What is going on there? Oh, that just looks weird for a second. But yeah, like trying to draw this blade manually would have been a nightmare if I tried to go in here and I went, well, okay, you know, how am I going to do this? And I started, you know, if I tried to draw it out, oh, geez, my hands are really wiggly. My hands are wiggly, my lines are wiggly. Even if I had done, you know, a path like this, probably wouldn't have turned out too good. Let's give it a shot, though. Let's see what a path at this resolution would have looked like. Get it as close as possible. Pencil. Yeah, you can see this gives... It's actually a good example. Even making a path at this resolution, you can see it gives that very uneven look I was talking about. So you have 2 pixels, then 3, then 4, then like 5. That might be 4, 2. It gives you that really uneven look that when you zoom out, you know, you can see, even at 100 or 200%, how it's very wiggly compared to what we had before. And by scaling it down the way we did, you get a much better basis for cleaning it up, and you don't have to do that much work. So, yep, that's pretty much it. Again, I can't really think of much else to do other than just complete the whole sprite, but I went an extra 15 minutes anyway. So I think we're going to cut it here and just say, I don't know, how are you on this lovely Tuesday that I'm recording this? You might not see it Tuesday. I don't know when I'll post it. Might be later tonight. It might be tomorrow. Maybe you're not even going to watch it then. Maybe you'll watch it in like a year on like a Thursday and be like, what the heck? What's he doing? It's not Tuesday. What's he even talking about? This guy's crazy. But yeah, that's going to be it. Thank you for watching. As always, if this video has helped you out, if you want to, you know, post the results of you trying techniques you saw in this video, or if you come up with a better method or anything you've learned from this, definitely let me know. And thanks again for watching, and thanks to all of my patrons, and thanks for dealing with my ridiculously unprofessional commentary on this, because I didn't really know how to tackle doing a video on this. You see me do this time and time again on stream, but again, it's not really something that, because a lot of it just sort of is in my head, I didn't really know how to go across talking about it and sort of taking what's in my head and making that, you know, understandable words that someone can follow. So hopefully this wasn't too baffling. Hopefully this wasn't too terrible. And hopefully you learned something, and I'll see you guys next time.